hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 151, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul, my friend, how are you?
I am enjoying the calmness of the month of December so far. It has been a surprisingly uneventful month, punctuated by football.
I was going to say it's a surprisingly eventful football punctuated by periods of quiet life.
Yes. I'm dealing with the cold turkey of going from 4 games to 2 a day.
I believe it. You got me watching it, which never happens. I don't ever watch sports. And you were during the first Canada game, you were texting me. And I thought, well, okay, Jesus, now I have to watch it because I gotta be able to keep up with the conversation. And so then I just sat there and I've been watching now. I got a month-long TSN subscription. I've just been watching games, and my friend, will be out for a beer and she'll bring up something about the game and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, that was a great shot. And she just is agape that I'm watching this goddamn thing.
And now, of course, you are well aware of why you must castigate your keeper and burn him.
That's right. Welcome to the football guys.
The football jocks.
I mean, mostly it's going to be Paul talking and me nodding my head and going, because I still know fuck all about the game. But well, moving on from football to all things strange and weird, I'm really looking forward to this episode because this is Dreams Part 2. We last episode was All I Have to Do Is Dream. This episode is All Aboard the Dream Train. And that is based on a story from a listener. And I tell you, man, doing a dream episode, and this happens every time, it just opens the floodgates. And we got so many wonderful stories. We have a massive script for you guys today. Paul and I were kind of looking at it, and I think it's about 40% longer. No, almost double our usual script length. So it's we're going to be here a long, long time, but we're looking forward to it because there is some great stuff from precognitive dreams to some of them, I don't even know what the fuck is going on, but it's really great stuff. And I can't wait to get into it. I will say, for me, my life has been uneventful because the last time we did a show, I was just getting over a cold and I had a couple great days. And then my roommate brought home a stomach bug. And I thought I managed to avoid it. Spoiler alert, I did not. So I basically spent another week getting over the stomach bug. But during that time, my author copies arrived for Strange Little Place 2.0. And so now, if you want to pick up a signed copy, you can get that at ghoststoryguyz.bigcartel.com. And it's going to be pretty tight by the time this comes out, whether we can get them to you for Christmas. So I wouldn't bank on that. But there's lots of copies, $20. And I'm happy to personalize it however you like. And again, that's at ghoststoryguyz.bigcartel.com. We are working on a really sweet new website that's going to incorporate all that stuff into one place, into ghoststoryguyz.com, but that's still a little ways down the road. But until then, if you want to pick up a signed copy of Strange Little Place, The Paranormal Secrets of Revelstoke, British Columbia, you can do that at ghoststoryguyz.bigcartel.com.
Yes, I'm not saying we've got postal problems here in the UK, but your books arrived before my payslip did. So, make of that what you will.
I don't even know what to say about that. Moving on from that to a much more inspiring topic. It's time to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, you're the AC to our DC, which is to say you give us not only the power to keep going, but you also keep us on this highway to hell. And of course, we'd like to thank all our patrons, but right now we would especially like to thank our latest patrons. They are
Sly One Bobcat,
JD Peterson,
April.
Guys, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate our patrons. I mean, we appreciate everyone who listens to the show. All of you help make Ghost Story Guys what we are, but the patrons are the ones who allow the show to continue, and we can never truly communicate how much we appreciate that. But thank you from the bottom of our terrible hearts. And if you want to join the team, listen to the end of the show. We'll tell you about all the cool shit you get. But we will say, for $1 a month, you get an ad-free feed. And who doesn't want that? Ads suck. So, if you want in on that action, head over to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. All right, and just before the break, shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Jerry Smith. Jerry's always taking commissions, so if you would like to hire them for your next project, shoot him an email at rainydaysforghosts@gmail.com. And of course, Jerry just finished the score for the also just recently released Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2, available on Full Moon Streaming. And I watched that the other day, and, well, it does exactly what it says on the tin. So, again, you can check that out along with Jerry's other feature, Puppet Master Dr. Death, via the Full Moon Streaming app. Now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. As we said before the break, on this episode, we're going to be talking about dreams again, because, by God, we just love fucking talking about dreams. And our audience does too, judging from the amount of correspondence we got. Jesus Christ. And we love it, of course. This is certainly not a complaint. Because like I said at the top of the show, we're doing, this is going to be a long one, by God. And I am really looking forward to it. But of course, before we get into the stories, got to check the mail.
Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you.
Our first email is from Taya. When I was in the late stages of my pregnancy, I had a dream about giving birth. For my whole pregnancy, everyone thought I was having a boy. In my dream, I gave birth to a girl with a full head of red curls. After being cleaned up, she sat upright on my belly and said to me, "We need to figure out how we're going to do this, just you and I." I woke up thinking, we need a girl's name. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and the baby I gave birth to was female and had a full head of red curls. We bonded instantly and are still very close. When Bear was a year old, the dad and I separated, so we were doing it all on our own, just Bear and me.
I love that, Taya. Thank you for sharing that. And she's a local listener, local to Victoria. She very, very generously gifted me with a grab bag of fake cheese products one day. And it was wonderful. I didn't realize there was fake Parmesan, and it was actually really good.
Oh.
It was, very kind. Yes.
I've got a cheese advent calendar this year.
Oh, nice.
I get a joke with every day.
Do you have one to hand?
I do, yes. What kind of cheese can you put around a castle? Mozzarella.
The cheesiest of jokes. Oh, man. That makes me happy.
I'll give you another one.
Hit me.
Why can't you make clothes out of cheese?
Why?
Because fromage fraise.
Oh, yep. Drink it in, folks. That's what you signed up for.
Bada, 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 bing.
There's times I wish this was a video podcast.
I've still got those rounders swings.
You still got the moves. Look at that. That's what peak performance looks like, folks.
Whoa. Prime.
Our next message is from Michael. Michael's a longtime listener of the show. Michael says, "It's your absolute favorite witch with another story." It's absolutely true. Michael is my favorite witch. Brennan, you know the history of witchcraft and my practices, so I'll cut to the chase with this story. My maternal grandma and my mom both could and can have prophetic dreams to startling degrees of accuracy. My dad's family, specifically my oldest aunt and uncles, can true dream. They dream about things that are happening now as they're happening. Whenever I spend the night at any of their houses, without fail, I will dream of things that happened when they were young. When I was little, I would wake up and tell them about it, to startled faces, but now it's just normal breakfast conversation. I landed somewhere in the middle with these gifts. Dreams of past and future, and then the ability to divine with my dreams. I have a tendency to augment this ability with a particularly potent incense blend I use before doing readings for people. This specific dream happened the night my maternal grandmother died. When she died, the ambulance came to pick her up, and it began to pour heavily. Cold rain, unusual weather for the early summer of California. I remember my dad came to pick me up, and he took me to his house. I stayed awake all night frantically praying to whoever would listen that she would be okay, or at the very least tell me why she died. I finally fell asleep as the sun was rising, around 7-ish. In those maybe 20 minutes of sleep before my mom picked me up, I dreamt of a bird coming to me and telling me everything would be all right. To this day, I do not recall the species, only that it spoke with a very comforting voice and its vague shape. As I got older, the bird would follow me. In the tradition I practice, the bird would specifically become my familiar, changing species as I matured. Moody teenager, a talkative crow, early 20s, a horned owl, and now in my late 20s, a California scrub jay and a red-tailed hawk. What's interesting to me specifically is that my grandma told me that helper spirits like mine could be our ancestors coming back to guide and aid us. I haven't asked my bird either, but I do get a sense of comfort and familiarity from her. I hope this gives someone some curiosity about familiars and others comfort knowing our loved ones can come back in some form. I hope you all are doing well. If I visit Vancouver next summer, I'll take a ferry to have coffee with you, Brennan. Well, Michael, that sounds like a deal to me. Maybe I'll even meet you over in the city because I don't want to inflict that ferry ride on anyone because it sucks. A lot of people don't realize this, Paul, but to get from Victoria to the mainland, it's not just an hour and 40-minute ferry. It's a 30-minute drive from downtown Victoria to the ferry, and then it's about an hour to an hour and a half from the ferry into Vancouver. It's just a pain in the ass.
So about the same length of time it takes me to get to London.
Yeah, except you're not going anywhere nearly as interesting. Yeah, you're going to London except with the opportunity to possibly drown. So going to London in a U-boat circa 1940 something, I think is the most...
Das Boot.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, going to London in Das Boot might be a similar experience.
Our next email is from Annette. Dear Brennan and Paul, I'm listening to your 150th episode on dreams tonight. I had to pause and write to thank you for your words and understanding of grief. I was widowed 12 years ago very suddenly. My beautiful husband of 24 years was gone in minutes with no warning. He was 50. Of course, all our friends and family were in shock and offered support, but that was pretty short-lived. As the years have dragged on, almost everyone who knew us has fallen away. Some friends have told me that I have to get over him and move on. They are uncomfortable around me even though I never bring him up. Counsellors term it complicated grief, which is not helpful either. You both express that there's no time limit on grief, and it never really goes away. You just learn to live with it. Even though I live it, thank you for saying that. As the holidays and anniversary of his death roll around once again, I find myself still missing him just as much as ever. Love is not a faucet. It can't just be made to happen at will, and if it's true and shared, it can't be turned off just because a dear one passes. I often feel judged by most around me, but you express what I felt for 12 years. It is a comfort to know that there are people who do understand, even if you are only voices on my iPad for me. It is a comfort to hear your depth of understanding. Thank you so much for that, and for keeping me company through your podcast.
Oh, well, Annette, thank you very much for the kind words, and we're happy that we can, sort of help with that, because it's hard. People struggle with grief, and not just the people having the grief. Like I don't know if you've had this in your life, Paul. I'm sure you have. People get uncomfortable around grief, and I think part of it is because one, that they don't know how to react, and two, I think it also sort of forces them to examine their own mortality, and I think that's scary.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever told the story on the show before, but I had an uncle who died while on vacation down in Tehachapi, California. He was from Revelstoke, and he was just down there with my aunt. He had a heart attack in the hotel pool and died. And when I got word that this happened, we were over at the house of some friends, Nick and I. We were watching a movie, and this was back before we had a car, so those friends would pick us up and drop us off. And so my mother called, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and she called to tell me that this had happened. And of course, we had to go. And so they drove us home, but the whole time they're driving us home, I was on the phone, and I wasn't openly weeping or anything, but I was talking to my family and trying to deal with this. And we never hung out with those friends again. And it wasn't a choice of ours. They had clearly been very uncomfortable with the proximity to grief. And they just always kind of kept this arm's length after that. And I mean, I didn't take it personally, shit happens. But it was interesting to notice the effect. And I don't think that's uncommon.
No. I've been in relationships before where I've lost dear people to me and I've been told to get over it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, why are you so upset for?
Yes.
And you're like, what? What is this a scoring system? What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, when I lost my grandfather, I was absolutely devastated for months, absolute months. And nothing anybody could say to me could take the edge off it. I mean, it came smack in the middle of probably the worst month of my life, to be honest. But there was a lot going on, and it was just like that. That was just like the shit cherry on the shit cake.
Right.
Really.
I mean, that's coincidentally when my grandfather passed, it was the same thing, actually. It was like, that was the shit cherry on top. It's insane to me to say to someone you love, how long are you going to be upset about this?
Yeah.
Because that happened to me. I mean, it wasn't my grandfather, but, I like people. I might seem like an asshole, but I like people. And
you're my kind of asshole.
Yeah, there we go. When I was working at Radio Shack back in the day, I had this two customers. I think they're both gone now, so I can say their name. It was Dorothy and Tom. And they were very like, Dorothy was very sweet. She was in probably her late 60s, early 70s. Tom was a little bit older. And the company would send me out to fix, because they're the kind of people that are always having computer problems because, they're elderly and the computers always end up with viruses. So they would send me out to fix the thing. And I became I wouldn't say close, but friendly with Dorothy and Tom. And when Tom passed, I wasn't awash in grief, but I was bummed out because he was a nice guy and I felt for Dorothy having lost someone. And I came home and it was the same thing. I mentioned this to my partner and she said to me, "Oh, how long are you going to be upset about this?" I thought, oh, boy, cool. All right. Well, it's good to know you have human emotions.
Give me the stopwatch. Let's go.
Yeah, right. And get out.
No. If there's one thing I've learned in life is I'm never surprised at how shitty some people who you believe have your best interests at heart really are.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, we'll actually be touching on this later because we have a listener story that kind of deals with this. So we'll get more into that because that can be disheartening when you realize that, the people who are supposed to be watching your back are not. But for now, thank you so much, Annette. And again, you take care. Next up is Sherry. I hope I'm getting that right. I just listened to your dreams episode. You were discussing losing pets and the related grief. My husband and I adopted 2 dogs 11 years ago, Bailey and Bella. They were the best dogs I've ever shared my patch of the planet with. Both of our girls were 4 when we found them, so they lived long and, I hope, happy lives. This year we lost both of our girls, Bailey in March and Bella in October. We are gutted. Since then, I've had only one dream that included Bella. I like to think that she came by to say that she would be there with Bailey, waiting by the Rainbow Bridge till we come to get them. Loss is loss, and I still break down regularly when it just gets to be too much. Grief is a tsunami. The waves keep coming, but they get smaller over time. Later in the episode, you talked about being alone in large buildings. One of the freakiest places I've ever been alone at night was a community center/arena. It was spooky. I found out later that it had been used as a morgue after Hurricane Hazel. We had security guards from that building that refused to come back. Thanks for the great podcast. You gentlemen make me laugh and give me the shivers. What a lovely combo. Well, thank you, Sherry. And I'm so sorry about the pooches. That's losing pets is just fucking awful. On the subject of the convention center, I like to watch these Urbex videos. I think they're called The Proper People. And they explore, abandoned structures and things like this. And I think it was them. They went through an old hotel/convention center during a hurricane. And it was just eerie as shit. Nothing really happened, but it was just eerie.
Yeah.
I'll try and remember to link that in the show notes if I can. It's I love that kind of stuff. I mean, some of these places you're going to watch out. You're going to get black lung or something, but fascinating.
Yeah, you've got to be careful.
I remember one time my cousin and I, we went to this old barn outside of Revelstoke because it was up for sale. It was empty. It was an old homestead, and I've told the story about exploring this other homestead with him on other shows, but this one was much closer to home. And we're wandering around this old barn and just like, because no one was home, so we're trespassing, I guess. But then you realize, holy shit, what are we doing? This place looks like it's about to fall down. We're both of us not small men. You disturb the wrong thing. This whole thing just collapses on you. And you get to the St. Peter's Gate and they just drop the trap door, sending you right to hell because you died being stupid.
There are numerous stories of people doing urban exploration who have had serious mishaps. So you've really got to be careful, like you say, because you just don't know what state something's in half the time.
No, that's it. I will say a great movie is called Castle Falls. It's not about urbex, but it's shot in a building that is often turns up in these like urbex videos. It's an old hospital, I want to say in Alabama. But it's a Scott Adkins, Dolph Lundgren movie, which it's actually really good for it's a great direct-to-video action movie. But yeah, it's shot in like an abandoned hospital. It's just very, very cool. It's called Castle Falls. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes. But moving on.
Next up, Dog Chomp. I got so excited when you asked for dream stories. I really wish I knew how to tell my experience better. I found so much solace in your previous dream episodes because I have fought off entities in my previous home. I don't remember a ton of details because this happened to me when I was very young, but I do recall a time when an entity had visited me. This person had come to me while I was in bed. I was lying down on my back, and it had come to sit next to me. It was looking at me the entire time, and it was sort of frightening, only based on its appearance. I remember seeing in black and white. It was pale, had sunken in dark eyes, an open mouth, and where its nose should have been was just the opening for the nasal bone. It had very prominent cheeks and a semi-grey, wispy hair. It also wore a sort of crown of thorns. It was really jarring to me, so I had sat up in my dream, and as soon as I sat up, I woke. But I was still laying flat on my back in bed. I also remember a time as a child where something of, I'd say, Indonesian descent slipped out of my closet to peer at me. It looked like how they sculpt their gods and goddesses in stone, but the figure was golden. Alright, truly time to fangirl over here. I really love the relationship between Bren and Paul have. I've been a long-time listener, and I'm really sorry to hear about the fallout between Bren and the previous person, but I'm so grateful to have Paul and Bren to get along so well. These podcasts have been very, enlightening and informative to me. Thanks so much for all you've done. You've made a very positive impact in my life, and I really appreciate all the hard work you both put into this podcast.
Dog Jump, thank you so much. And folks, we could have done so much more email, and honestly, it's a struggle for me sometimes to put the really nice stuff in there because I don't want it to seem self-congratulatory, but I also want to acknowledge all the kind stuff you folks say and how much we appreciate when you send us email and let us know how the show has affected you and what you think of the topics and things like that. So thank you to everyone who wrote in. And if you want to write us, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com is the best way to do it. And you can send us a comment or a question or, of course, a story, as you'll hear. And you can do that either typed in old-fashioned email style, or you can record it as a voice note, attach it to the email, and send it to us. We're going to be playing a few of those on our upcoming listener story show. So thank you again to everyone who reached out. And you know what that means? It means it's time for the stories. After the funeral. So this happened about a year ago. It had been a while since my great uncle had been diagnosed with cancer, and he wasn't doing well. About 3 months before he died, my family visited him to see him one last time. He lived in the Midwest while we lived in the Northwest, so we couldn't see him easily. I myself wasn't particularly close with him, but my mother was, seeing as he was her uncle and all. Nothing unusual happened in the visit. It was just to say hello and to let him know that we loved him. Fast forward 3 months, and my mom got a text saying he had officially passed away in the night. Of course, she was very sad, so we did the best we could to comfort her. And since he passed during the school year and pre-COVID, we kids couldn't go to his funeral, but my mom did. The day of the funeral, I went to bed around 1 a.m., so this would have been after the funeral, and almost immediately I was swept into a super realistic dream. It panned out to show me in this very fancy black dress that had lace and long sleeves, which I assumed would be something you'd wear to a funeral. I was standing in a graveyard during the day, but the colors were too bright, the sky too blue and the grass too green. I could see myself in the dream, like someone was looking at me, and my face was unmoving and staring blankly ahead. The closest thing I could compare it to is a doll, I guess. Then the view flipped to show my great uncle. The first thing I remember about him in that dream is that he was mad. His face was scrunched up in a scowl and his teeth were gritted. He was super thin and bony because of the cancer, I guess, and he was shaking his finger at me and pointing. He was quiet at first, but that somehow made it worse. He said, "You didn't come to the funeral. Why didn't you come to the funeral?" Then it switched back to me, and I looked the same as earlier and just didn't say anything. It switched back to him, and he started raising his voice, just screaming, "You didn't come to my funeral. Why didn't you come to the funeral?" He kept screaming that over and over again until his voice became distorted and lower, almost growling. His face became stretched out, and his mouth was bigger than his head. It was horror movie shit. The sky at this point had turned gray, and all the clouds were still and black. He started reaching for me, still screaming and looking horribly disfigured. And then I woke up. It was 3 a.m. This was especially weird since it was the day after the funeral, which makes it even harder to write off as some nightmare. And it's important to remember, we were not close, so I hadn't felt any guilt in not going to the funeral. I think this would count as paranormal, but I don't know if that was like his spirit or his ghost or what it was, but it was freaky. And I included this one, Paul, because we have some great stories coming up about like really wonderful people who passed and coping with their loss. And I thought, well, we need one story. This is not a listener story. This is just a found story. We need one story where the dead guy was a motherfucker. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you have come from beyond the veil, you have clawed your way back from the abyss that is death to shame someone for not commuting across the country to your funeral, you deserve to die. I actually know someone who had a dream like this, who they got shit from someone after they died for not coming to the funeral in a dream. Now, in this case, I think it might have just been a guilt dream. But yeah, I read this and I thought, what a bastard.
It does often as well. What a waste of opportunity that if you are able to connect from beyond the veil, why waste it on something so trivial?
That's what I mean. It's like finding the secret to eternal youth and using it to keep your lawn green.
Yes. Well, I don't know.
No. Lawns are bad. We're gonna fight over this one. Kids, put on your headphones. Dad and Dad are about to have a fight.
I remember once being caught hoovering my lawn.
Hoovering your lawn?
Yeah. I trimmed it and I couldn't get the bits. I trimmed it with scissors around the edge and I couldn't get the bits up properly, so I hoovered it.
As an adult?
No, I was 4.
Okay. Oh, thank God. I don't know.
Yes, as an adult.
I don't know, man. We were just talking about maybe you learn things about the people you love that you think, oh shit. Paul's like, I like a really nice, neat fucking lawn.
Yeah. It's all my granddad's fault, that gardening.
That's fair. I feel like that's something that's definitely a hand-me-down. You can tell in Revelstoke, you can tell which houses belong to the old Italian families because they have immaculate lawns. Greener than anything else on this earth. I don't know what kind of Malocchio voodoo they employ to make this happen. But yeah, all the Italians in Revelstoke, I mean, a lot of them have passed now, but when I was younger, yeah, you could tell because they had perfect lawns. And I would believe they would be out there hoovering up the clippings. So it's not impossible. Just imagining you out there in the vacuum. Can't wait to talk about this on a podcast in 10 years.
I've seen things you can only imagine. From Micah. Just the usual. I love your podcast. I've been listening since about 2019 and can never get enough. It's the one part of my day that doesn't make me feel completely insane. While I have multiple stories over a lifetime thus far of weird experiences, I really wanted to send this one in. It's not the most terrifying top-of-the-line story I could tell, but it is the one that means the most to me. Enjoy. When I was in the 4th grade, my parents and I lived with my great-grandmother. We moved in because she'd been diagnosed with diabetes and needed daily injections. My great-grandmother was one of those tough, tiny southern women who could brighten a room with a smile, but also managed to terrify you if you broke the rules. Needless to say, she could take care of herself, and the injections never bothered her. However, the whole family knew that she was addicted to Mountain Dew and orange sherbet. She lived alone since my great-grandfather had passed away when I was about 3 or 4 years of age, approximately somewhere around 1996 or so. She was always the glue that held our family together, and she was my best friend, even back then. I loved sitting on the couch watching cartoons when she fell asleep in her favourite chair. At night, she'd walk me to my room at the other end of the house without truly waking me if I fell asleep during QVC hour. I secretly still wonder if this tiny woman had the magical ability to levitate me to my bedroom, since I never remembered ever waking up between my walk from the couch at the north end of the house to the bedroom at the south end. She put up with my childish attempts to scare her and other antics growing up, and although other foods in the house were questionable by their use-by dates, she always had a fresh box of toaster strudels for me in the freezer. She died of a heart attack when I was in the 5th grade. It was a normal night, everyone said their goodnights and we set off. My grandmother stayed awake in her favourite chair, and I went off to bed. I heard nothing that night. And that's the most prominent statement of this story. I heard nothing. I was forcefully awoken by my mum about 3:30, telling me to move quickly. I had no idea what was happening, and the word quickly meant nothing to me immediately. However, when my eyes started to adjust, I saw red blinking lights through my window. Red, white, yellow, white, blue. I jumped out of my bed and opened my door. My mum tried to catch me and block me from the hallway, but I had pushed past her, looking straight down the hallway through the kitchen to the room my grandmother stayed in the most. She was laying on the floor, prone position, with EMTs, paramedics and the police all around her. Her head was turned toward me, facing me as I faced her. I can't say 100% that she was alive at that moment, but I always felt she was. The last moment I saw her, her face imprinted into my memory. The image of my best friend, my grandmother, looking at me dead on as she was loaded into the bed and carted away by the emergency responders, who later stated that night that she had died before she reached the hospital. I was in shock. I hadn't heard the calls, the sirens, the lights never woke me. I never heard the doors open or the voices of the people moving quickly through the house. What is surprising about this is the fact that I never slept well as a child, or now as an adult. Every noise woke me, and if it wasn't that, it was the night terrors or dreams that scared me awake. I slept through it all. My mum had always told me it was something protecting me, as I was too young to see what I had already seen. I don't know if I quite believed that, and for years that angered me as if I had lost a certain amount of time to say a last goodbye or to help. It took me about a week to break through the shock. I was the last to cry, but when I finally did, I missed a week of school as if everything would set in at once. The sadness, guilt, loss, loneliness, the realization that my best friend was really gone, and the last image I had in my mind were the dying eyes that I never got the chance to say goodbye to. One night, not too long after, I believe I received goodbye even if the child in me did not say it back. I was laying in bed with my light on like normal, and had finally started to drift off to sleep. I was abruptly torn from my near sleep state when I heard footsteps down the hallway coming to my room. At first I thought it was my parents, but their door was closed and the light was off. I'd have heard their door open if it was them. The footsteps came down the hallway slowly, but sounded like more than one person. As the floor creaking came closer to my bedroom door, I jumped up and grabbed a Bible from my bookshelf, then jumped back into bed while pulling the sheets over my head, as if any of that would save me. The footsteps came closer, bypassing my door and entering my room. I heard the floor cease to creak right at the edge of my bed. I was scared shitless. 10-year-old me was shaking under a blanket with a book in my hand. I felt the blanket on the side of me pushed down, as if someone had placed their hand on the side of my bed. In my great-grandmother's tone and accent, I heard, "It's okay, dear. It's just me. Just checking in." I can't confirm if it was a loud thought I had imagined to make that moment easier, or if it was actually words drifting through the open air around me, but I can still hear the words clearly in my memory today. I believe in my heart that it was my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather finally returning to each other and checking in on me one last time. That thought still gets me through the hard times these days, and I'm 30 now.
Micah, thank you very much for sharing that. And I mentioned this, I got this again later in the script, but I was editing these stories today in a coffee shop around the corner from my place. And there was a couple stories that made me tear up a little bit, and this was one of them. And that, there's nothing quite like, choking down a protein bar while you're holding back tears in a coffee shop full of hipsters.
It's an endearing image.
Yes. Yeah. Let's not dwell on that. I love that her grandma, her thing was Mountain Dew and orange sherbet, because that is a woman after my own heart. Are you a Mountain Dew guy?
It's not available in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's banned. No.
Banned?
No.
Okay. I mean, we've got that possible sponsor coming up, and when they shipped, they couldn't ship me the stuff directly because you can't legally sell it in Canada, so they had to send it via our network. Yeah. So it's not impossible. Yeah.
No, it's. I'm aware of it. I have drunk it on my travels, so okay. I'm aware of it. So it's very similar to kind of a mixture between Sprite and Lilt, which are two drinks we have in the UK.
Yeah, that's not far off. It's very sweet. Like very sweet. I think it's actually even sweeter in the States. I think the recipe is a little bit different up here. But oh man, when I was younger and could drink, so I don't know if I could drink soda more, but I could process it a little bit better than I can now. I used to love drinking that shit. That, and for a while, I don't know if they still do it. They used to do Mountain Dew Code Red. And I don't know what the hell the difference was other than it being red, but and Lord knows what horror that did to my insides, but man, was it tasty. I used to sit around playing video games, chugging that crap, and oh yeah, orange sherbet too. This has actually convinced me to go try and I got to place a grocery order here in the next couple of days. I'm going to see if I can get me some orange sherbet because by God, I love that shit.
That's nothing different to the sherbet that we would have. No.
Well, no, you guys for sherbet isn't sherbet. It's like a powdered sugar.
Yes.
Okay.
Just.
No, this is like sorbet.
Oh.
It's yeah.
Oh, so sherbet.
Sherbet. Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. It's I don't know why they call it sherbet. I have no idea. I've seen sherbet, but when I was a kid, we called it sherbert, which made it sound like some kind of demented Muppet. But really, really great stuff. Okay, so you don't have Mountain Dew. Did you have toaster strudel?
I've got an idea what it is, but no.
Wow. Oh man. Okay, so when we finally get you over here, and actually, I don't think I've mentioned this to you yet. One of our listeners works for a Canadian airline. I won't say which, just in case it might get him in trouble. But they sent us 2 discount codes for flights, which are good till the end of next year. So we got one each. So who knows? Maybe we'll get you over here sooner than later. But
excellent. Whoever that person is, keep me in mind in 2026, please. Thank you.
Alan, I believe it was Alan.
When England come to defend the World Cup.
Well, Paul's hallucinating. His house is filling with radon gas.
Ah, who's that? Who's there? Who is it?
Okay. We better stop before Emily Blunt turns up, or at least he thinks she does. But when you come, yeah, there's so many of these things because toaster strudel, I don't even know if they sell them anymore, but it was like a Pop-Tart. You've had Pop-Tarts?
I've had them once.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah,
I'm aware of them and the phenomena of them.
I tell you, when I'm not broke anymore, I'm sending you a bunch of shit.
Don't send me a Twinkie. Jesus.
No,
I would never eat one of them again. That's just like eating sugar with filling in it.
No, I wouldn't send you a Twinkie. But I mean, Pop-Tarts, that's critical breakfast food staples. I mean, when we went to LA with the family in the summer, one of the first things I bought in the grocery store was Pop-Tarts. Because down in the States, they have all kinds of crazy, like up here, we have all the usual shit, strawberry and raspberry and all that crap. But down there, I think we had, was it s'mores? S'more flavored. So it's basically it's diabetes pressed into a single physical form. It's incredible. Toaster strudel was like a Pop-Tart, but instead of the fancy shit on the inside, as I recall, it came with like an icing packet that you squeezed over top once you heated it up.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine toast with icing, basically.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. I recall it being as good as it sounds. I don't know which is better, toaster strudel or Pop-Tarts, but...
were there a variety of flavors of this strange thing?
I don't recall. We were a Pop-Tart household. I think Pop-Tarts were cheaper. So I don't know, but I remember trying it a couple times and enjoy. I mean, anything with icing on it, I'm on board.
Nothing will ever replace the crushing disappointment of trying a Twinkie after spending years reading comics from America with Twinkie adverts in it and thinking, well, if Spider-Man likes this, it must be good. And I was like, what is this in my mouth?
Also what Spider-Man said about Mary Jane, which was another quantity that I never quite understood.
Which is very odd because I used to have shitloads of sugar in my coffee and then I just stopped.
Oh, really?
And I don't have sugar at all.
Interesting.
And now even a smidgen of sugar in any hot drink makes me recoil like I've just drunk a cup of hot urine.
That speaks of experience. And no, that's a story I want to know. Tell me about your hot urine experience, Paul. So I was vacuuming my lawn. Another life. The day I got knocked out started like any other day. In my last semester of college, I would walk back and forth from campus to my rooming house so I could clear my head after a day of having information crammed into it. My mind would often wander as I walked, sure, but that's only because it never occurred to me to watch out for wayward jeeps jumping the curb. On this particular day, well, that's exactly what happened. I'm no athlete, but obviously had some latent reflexes working because I managed to clear out of the way just in time. My reflexes may have been working, but my common sense wasn't because I started shouting at the driver, who I recognized too late as a football player from my college not known for his impulse control. He got out of the Jeep and decided this whole thing was my fault, expressing his displeasure with a right hook that knocked me out cold. It's a miracle I didn't die hitting my head on the ground. Instead of dying, the opposite happened. I lived another life. In it, I met a wonderful young lady, Marcy, who made my heart skip, and over the course of months we became friends, then lovers. After 2 years together, we got married, and not long after that, our daughter Winter was born. My job was good enough. Marcy didn't have to work unless she wanted to, and she opted to stay home and raise Winter. 2 years into this domestic bliss, our son Ryan was born. Our kids filled our home with joy, and I would spend time with them every day before and after work. I was happier than I could ever imagine being, and all memories of my past life and the punch that laid me out had faded. Then there was the lamp. It was unremarkable at first. Red with gold trim, a white shade, and a square base. It was next to our big sofa, and it was while sitting there after work that I first noticed something was wrong. The perspective of the lamp was odd, like it was inverted. It still occupied three-dimensional space, but not the way it should have been. It transfixed me. I couldn't look away. That first night, I stayed up all night, staring at it, and called in sick to work the next morning. Something about that lamp wasn't right, but I was the only one who could see it. I stopped eating. The only time I'd leave the couch was to use the bathroom. For 3 fucking days, I sat there, staring, as Marcy became more and more concerned. She brought a mental health professional to the house to speak to me, but I was no longer in my right mind. Marcy took the kids to her mother's house so they wouldn't see me in that state, and it was there, in the silence, that I had my epiphany. The lamp wasn't real. The house wasn't real. Marcy, Winter, Ryan, none of them real. The last 10 years of my life had not happened. Once that thought arrived, the lamp began to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted, but kept growing and growing. Soon it took up my entire perspective, and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises. And then I became aware of pain. A fucking shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth." And then I opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people I didn't know, some of whom were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point thereafter, a cop who didn't want to wait for an ambulance scooped me up in his arms and dragged me into his squad car. Yeah, don't do that, folks. At the hospital, I was given CT scans and so on to make sure I hadn't suffered any permanent physical damage, and thankfully everything came out negative. The mental damage, however, was severe. For 3 years, I suffered a brutal depression as I grieved not only the loss of my family, but came to terms with the fact they'd never been real in the first place. I was afraid I was losing my mind. Night after night, I'd cry myself to sleep, hoping to at least see Marcy in my dreams, but I never have. Sometimes, and this is something I've never admitted to anyone in person, I can still see Ryan, but only ever in brief glimpses out of my peripheral vision. He's always the same age as he was when I was taken away, and sometimes he seems to be saying something, but I still cannot hear what.
It's a concept I just can't get my head around, how that would have so much emotional baggage that it would cause someone to long for a life they've never had.
I guess it's because to them, it seems like a real thing. It'd be like if, if I woke up tomorrow and I was 20 years old again, and I was in my, my apartment above Bocce's, and I was getting ready, I had to get to work at downstairs in a couple hours. And you think, well, that's 15 years of life. That's 10 years of life. Like Nikki wasn't real. You weren't real. And my whole life, this life I built, like imagine like 10 years of building something and all the connections and everything that promises for the rest of your life. And all of a sudden it's just not real. But to you, it's after you woken up, it's still real. Like they're gone, but the emotions you felt for them are still there. Like that's to me, that's a horror show. I could actually really easily imagine that for some fucking reason.
Yeah. I just think it sounds awful.
I mean, it was a plot line in Constantine, the comic books. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, amongst many of the other weird storylines.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other episode. But I mean, I will say though, folks, this is again Uncle Brent tip: don't punch people, because that can end very badly. I know you see movie fights and people are swinging and it's all good times and you think you're a real badass. One, you're going to break your hand. Two, the danger is, one, hitting someone on the head is very dangerous. Two, them hitting the ground is much more dangerous. And holy shit, that's scary. Forget dream lives. You must have seen some shit.
Yeah. I once got sucker punched from behind at a gig.
Oh my God.
And didn't realize what had happened till I hit the floor, and I went, hang on a minute, why am I on the floor?
Oh, jeez.
And the realization that I couldn't get back up was very scary.
I bet. Holy shit.
Not good. Not good at all.
Kidding.
Broke 3 ribs as well on the way down.
Really? Just in the fall?
Yeah, I hit a table.
Oh, dude.
Broke 3 ribs. It was like 4 weeks before Christmas.
Oh, Christ, of course it was.
And it wasn't nice. Completely sucker punched.
No reason whatsoever. Did you know the person?
Just an arsehole.
Holy shit, man.
At a gig who was off his tits, and him and his mates just swung me. And it was literally my mate, there was about 10 of us, and 7 of them had gone. And then 10 seconds later, that happened.
Oh, man. Brutal.
So, yeah, not good.
No, it's been a long time since I've been hit in the face. And I was actually having this conversation with a friend of mine, because obviously I got 2 consecutive bugs, and we'll say my enthusiasm for not being home cozy in my own bed was pretty low.
Yeah.
And I said to my friend, I said, right now, I don't know if you've ever been hit in the face, like hard, but there is a certain point where you get hit in the face hard enough where your enthusiasm for the fight just ends.
Yeah.
And right now, that's how I feel. I feel like I got hit in the face real hard and I don't want to fight anymore.
It's not a good feeling. I
just want to sleep. No.
I've seen lots of worse things, to be honest. I've seen some horrendously strange things. I've seen things that are so out of control that it's quite funny.
Right.
I've seen fights break out in bars that are like something out of an old Wild West film, and there's like 30 people scrapping.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So it's a strange world. I've seen some very, very, very weird things, especially within 3 weeks of moving to Sheffield, I'd seen a man on PCP prove just how powerful a drug that was.
Oh, no.
Because I've never seen anybody in my life get hit that hard and get straight back up.
Really?
Yeah. He got knocked about 8 foot. And
Holy shit.
He just bounced up like a vampire. It was unreal. I've never seen anything like it. And he had a massive knife.
Of course he did. It's not an English fight story unless a bladed weapon is present.
And we were all like, had to barricade ourselves in the bar.
Jesus Christ.
And then we had to go to court because he took the person that had punched him in self-defense to court for assault.
No.
Yeah.
How did that go?
He got off, but he got charged.
The knife guy PCP guy got charged? Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, criminal damage, GBH. I think he got about 9 years.
Jesus Christ. Well, that sounds like prison is the right place for him.
But yeah, the case wasn't going to court until the guy that punched him in self-defense got arrested and charged. And then obviously they charged the other guy. And it took about 2.5 years. It was a right pain in the arse. I was just like, how has this got this way around? It was crazy. Never seen anything like it. But yeah.
Man.
Yeah. That was the situation because I ended up at one bit. It was all going nuts. And I got cornered in this alley at the side of the pub. And he looked at me and there was no way for me to go. I was like 10-foot walls. I couldn't get away. So if he'd have clocked me and come down my end, God knows.
Holy shit, dude.
God knows what would have happened.
Wow.
So yeah, always been a lucky bastard.
I don't know, you ended up on this call, so not that lucky.
Yeah, it could have been worse, mate. I got back up in the end.
Yeah. My only connection to that was I was in and I don't know if I've told the story on the show before. I might have. One night I was in Burger King with a friend of mine. It was super late. It was when I'd be driving around Victoria till ass o'clock. And I remember sitting in Burger King with my friend. We were just watching people. And there was this one guy, young guy, probably early 20s as I recall. And he had a Hawaiian shirt on with a white t-shirt underneath it, I think. And I remember saying to my friend, that guy's a bruiser. That guy's going to hurt someone. And later that night, that guy killed someone. I won't say anything more because I think it might still be in court because the things move very slowly here. But yeah, I remember distinctly looking at that guy and thinking that guy's trouble. And reading the newspaper a couple of days later, I remember hearing someone had been killed that night in a popular hangout spot. And then I saw the picture in the paper and I thought, oh shit. And yeah. But it wasn't me. So, I mean, I can't bitch too much, but I tell you, man, as the older I get, that's the closest I want to get to any kind of fucking fight. I got nothing to prove.
I think it's always good if you're called Paul and one of your friends is called Paul and they're having an affair with a gangster whose nickname was Shotgun Frank and all they know is that their wife's run off with somebody called Paul. That's a conversation I didn't want.
Folks, I can't tell you how much I look forward to these moments. When I learn something new about the history of our young friend Paul Bestel here. What was that? You can tell me off air? I don't know. How did that end?
I just said, it's not me. It's the wrong Paul.
And that worked?
Yeah.
That's fucking fantastic.
I said, he's not here. He's not here. And obviously somebody else came in and said, no, he's not banging. Well, he's not banging your wife. That other lad. Honestly, and he went, and I could feel my butthole flapping in the wind. Like that. I was like, yeah. You're in trouble when somebody called Shotgun Frank turns up, mate.
Yeah, these are not visits you want.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, about 20 years later, I became I was working in social improvement as a job coach. So I was working with a lot of people who didn't have computer skills and didn't know how to write a CV, long-term unemployed. And this guy got assigned to me and he came in and it was him. It was Shotgun Frank.
Well, good on him for improving his station.
Yeah, he didn't remember me, but I remembered him.
Oh, he didn't remember you?
Yeah. We kind of talked around it, but he couldn't remember that or whatever. I mean, he drank a lot. He didn't have many brain cells left, poor fella. But yeah, that was one of those things that happens. It was about 20 years later, and he came in. Because he didn't know how to use a computer or anything, and I had to train him. And I'm thinking, How the world does turn.
The best thing you can hope for when meeting a man named Shotgun Frank is that his memory is not long.
All aboard the dream train from Logan. I had this dream a couple of years back, maybe 2 or 3, and with time I have forgotten the first few acts of the dream and what led up to the portion I'm sharing now. The first vivid part was what felt like waking up, riding on top of a train. Now this wasn't a full-sized cargo train. Picture the little Christmas trains they set up in shopping malls for children to ride on. I awoke in what many would call a back room, where the room was simply a tan, plain box with the train track set up in an oval, similar to how a running track is around a football field. The ceiling was low, closer to the height of the interior of a house rather than a cafeteria or gymnasium, and the room itself was not expansive either. There were windows evenly spaced along all 4 walls, closer to the ceiling than the floor. I realised I was sat atop the train, which was working its way around and around this track. As the train was speeding past, I saw snippets of various other dreams in each window. And when I say window, I mean it as a literal window-sized hole in the wall. No glass, no screen, just a hole. I can't recall them all, but I remember some looked more like memories or experiences I've already had in life, playing out in the room in which the window connected to. And while I didn't actually have time to watch each dream playing out in each of their individual windows, I knew that they were memories, or could be memories, thinking parallel universe, as well as simple dreams. Whatever opening I had come through to get into the room had gone, and at some point I noticed a small opening at the far corner of this room, and I can only describe it as if it was the mouth of an X-ray conveyor belt, where the belt feeds luggage through a rubber flap-covered slot into the X-ray machine. In my dream there was an offshoot of train track that went through the ridiculously low doorway, covered with the same rubber flaps to prevent seeing through it. Now I'm not new to lucid dreaming. I have a lovely condition where nearly every morning I wake up with some level of sleep paralysis and need a variety of alarms to actually wake myself up. If I remember a dream, or have a vivid dream, I always become lucid, unable to wake myself, but almost always aware that A, I am asleep, and B, I cannot be harmed. So, I quickly realised I was asleep. I was aware that I was dreaming of this little train room, and dreaming the experience. I don't believe anyone else was in the room though I mentally spoke to someone, most likely myself. I recall thinking or asking, how the hell do I get out of this? And I'm receiving the answer, pick one, or it will pick for you. Again, at this point, I simply knew and understood that I would have to jump through one of the windows to escape this never-stopping train. So I stood up, and the perspective shifted. Now the train cars were the size of actual cars, but were moving at a steady, calm pace. I wasn't sure which window to pick, so I simply lined myself up for the next window and jumped. I don't remember the details of actually passing through the window, but at the time of having this dream, I was spending the night with a man I had been dating. Once I left the train conveyor room and passed through this window, I was in this man's room, above myself, watching us sleep. As clear as day, I could see us laying together in the dark. The details of the room and the furniture, down to where his dirty laundry was piled and where my phone charger had been left laying. I walked around a bit, went into the living room, thought, well, what the hell do I do now? And walked back to the bedroom. I remember standing over my sleeping self, looking down at myself in bed. Again, the details of the transition are fuzzy, but I climbed back into myself, like a wrestling move from the top row. I jumped into my sleeping body, and was suddenly back on the train. At this point, the ceiling of the room was sinking closer, and the train was picking up speed. While the rest of this dream is stitched together by connecting the dots or hazy transitions, The following is the most vivid part of the dream that sticks with me still. While I deliberated how to get out of this purgatory train room, the offshoot track had been engaged. In a split second I looked up and realised this train was heading for the goddamn wall. There were many, many cars, so I watched as they disappeared up ahead into the slot on the wall. Too narrow and too low for me to fit through. I'm picturing Wile E. Coyote on a train speeding on a painted on... I'm picturing Wile E. Coyote on a train speeding for a painted-on tunnel. A train moving too fast now to safely make it to a window. I remember that I was asleep and that I couldn't be harmed. So I dropped to my stomach, closed my eyes as tight as I could, and waited for the wall. As my train car reached what would have been the wall, I woke up in real life, physically jolted in the bed, heart racing. I was awake for real, in the man's room in the dark, where he was sleeping still. It took me a while to get my bearings, and even longer to convince myself to go back to sleep, afraid that I would fall back into the rooms again and be stuck between dream worlds. I've pondered this dream a lot, the meaning behind it. Perhaps it was merely a Willy Wonka-esque dream my brain had concocted. Perhaps I was in the back rooms of this consciousness. I mean the term train of thought and all. I'm a weathered veteran of lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis, so I'm not new to choosing how my dreams play out and interacting with them. Maybe this was simply a lucid dream. Maybe it's the inner workings of the mind. Like a Rolodex of options, pick a dream and jump. If not, you're booted back to being awake. The astral dreaming of looking down on myself in the bed is a whole nother nut to be cracked. But I included it to explain that I had gotten off that train, that I ended up back on the train, and why it was quite spooky and alarming when I did jolt awake, having to test if it was really real, or just some other level of inception. Thanks for reading, and thank you even more for doing the work you do. I adore both of you men, and treasure the time I get to spend turned into the weird and mysterious paranormal tales. Happy holidays to you both. Don't get too drunk for New Year's. I'll probably be just coming around to being sober on New Year's, but anyway.
New Year's is my friend's birthday, so I imagine I'll be sober. But
yes, I'm going out for afternoon tea New Year's Eve.
Fancy.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going?
A local emporium.
What does emporium mean?
Establishment.
I see. Okay.
On Abbeydale Road that is famous for its afternoon teas.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's a festive special.
Oh, that sounds very nice. This all sounds very, the way you're describing it all sounds very circumspect, like there's something like illegal happening. You know, like it's an emporium.
There probably will be.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. No, Shotgun Frank will be there.
No, it's a very nice establishment. It's lovely, very nice. So
very cool.
Thought do something a little bit different on New Year's Eve in the afternoon. So we're there at 1:00, so it should be nice.
Oh, very cool. I know for a couple of years pre-COVID, Nick and I were going for a Christmas buffet at the Laurel Point Inn in Victoria on Christmas Day. You know, we it was nice, gorgeous. It's a gorgeous place, a beautiful restaurant, and the spread was real nice. So I don't know. We got to figure out what we're doing this year. We've got Boxing Day reservations at the steakhouse that I'm really looking forward to. It was recommended to me very highly, and because she's going to be here for about 10 days.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of cool stuff lined up. But anyways, back to Logan's story. Logan, thank you for sharing that. First off, and I love one of the reasons I wanted to share that is just because aside from being a great story, is I had my own dream train experience.
Yes. Which
I shared in the Call of Dreams episode. And also because I love the notion that Logan just jumped right back into the body.
Yes.
You know, like from the top rope, like a kind of like sort of like Hulk Hogan meets the Matrix. You think that's air you're breathing, brother? I freaking love that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I was thinking that I was actually wondering if this was just like I shouldn't say just, but if this was a more kind of like one of those, like a brain dream, not necessarily a going somewhere dream, but like kind of like something, like kind of internally forcing yourself to make a choice on something.
Yeah, it's like your brain's filing itself and tidying things up.
Yeah. Because I was thinking it was significant that it started out as a toy train, but then once Logan decided to make that decision, the train then became a real train. Yeah. So it's almost like, okay, now that we're actually going to make the decision, the consequences are real, and so it's much more proper scale.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that is necessarily accurate, but that occurred to me.
Like you say, you will speak to people that have dreams like this where they seem to be on some like kind of carousel or something as well, and it's almost as if their life's going around and they pick particular parts of it or something, and there seems to be some kind of these are your choices.
Yeah, the presence of the voice I thought was really significant. That voice saying, either you make a choice or that choice will be made for you. Because it almost like it sounds like a higher self voice,
Yeah.
And I was thinking that, that's just, life writ large, right? And I think that's something so many people don't understand, is that if they don't come down one way or another, then life is just going to keep happening to them.
Yep.
I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine. We used to hang out a lot at night. And one night we were coming out of Tim Hortons and this friend looked at me and they said, man, it just hit me. I'm 33 years old. I said, yeah. And this person said, I'm an adult. And I said, yeah. I don't know that necessarily holding a box of donuts at 1 a.m. is the best time to have this realization, but I guess maybe we call that a moment of clarity. And it was fascinating. And I realized that was actually a really profound moment for that person, because I think they had kind of lived their life up to that point, sort of being told, maybe not up to that point, but I think a large portion of their formative time, they were spent having their decisions made for them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they were aware that, oh no, I am the one, like I'm calling the shots. And I think it scared the shit out of them because they, how sometimes in therapy, people will have a revelation and then they'll kind of run from it because it means having to change their world.
Yeah.
That's what happened. This person just ran from it. We're not friends anymore, I'm sad to say, but it's because, they just refused to evolve to the point where they actually almost seem to aggressively oppose the idea that they might grow.
Yeah.
I'd never actually seen anything quite like it, but I'll never forget that moment. They just said, oh man, I'm 33. I'm an adult. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Welcome.
Well, I think it's one of those concepts that sometimes people think, oh, well, I should be doing this. I should have done that. And now I'm this age, I need to do that. And I don't think these days things are that set in stone anymore.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's something I sometimes battle with quite a lot, that I often look back and think, what if I'd done something earlier? Or what if I'd made the decision and I hadn't got away with it? Or I'd not took the jump when I did. I think sometimes that's as difficult and as dangerous because that eats you up more. And I've learnt more so these days to not worry about what's happened, but only focus on what I can now control, which is essentially everything I've done for the last 4.5 years. And life is what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand completely, man. I mean, when I was growing up, I think my family always, because I was a smart kid, but I didn't get a lot of direction. And I think they always just thought, oh, he's going to do something, and I never really did. I just kind of drifted, and it wasn't really until, I don't know, I was maybe 25, 26 that I actually started, sort of making conscious, choices. And even now, I find myself thinking like, what if I had, what if I'd gone to college? What if I'd gone to university? Because I know there's like, that's where a lot of people make their social connections that then benefit them professionally, and what if I'd done that instead of starting to do all this shit from scratch, while burdened with the fact that I relate to people like I'm a weird space alien. But like you said, it's I guess the important thing to remember is, and this is something I struggle with, is it's all that matters is that you took the reins.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you did before that. I mean, if you hurt people, then you got to own that. But other than that, like, just once you take control, then that's the important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like being a weird space alien.
You are better at humaning than I am, though. I will give you that.
I'm amazing at. I can fit in all over the place. Me.
Yeah.
Unless people talk to me about cars, and then I'm up shit creek without a paddle. Man stuff. People start talking to me about man stuff, and I can't do small talk. I am shit at small talk. We were at a party the other week, and somebody said something to me about a band, and I said, "Oh, have you ever seen them live?" And they went, "No." I went, "Well, how can you say that statement that you've just made? Then that's bollocks." Myself. And I thought, well, I was being a bit rude, but they were a dick. So I don't care.
Yeah, no loss.
No, not particularly. I don't think my life would be enriched by getting to know that person anymore.
See, I'm great at small talk, but I'm also shit at recognizing when people want to talk. If someone comes up to me and says something, I will give them the information they need, but then I will stop because I can't possibly imagine why someone would want to have a conversation with me. So I will just kind of assume that they're after a very particular piece of information, which I provide. And then I just kind of like go back into standby mode. And, these people will, and sometimes I can tell if they hang around and think, oh, you actually want to have a conversation, which I find delightful because I love conversation. But most of the time I just think, well, I cannot possibly imagine why this person would want to speak to me. So I assume you must be after a particular piece of information.
Yes. Like it's one of those dangerous things. Don't ever mention or say to me, so what about Bigfoot when I've had 4 pints?
One of my life goals is to do just that.
Because have you got 2 hours? Because you're about to be talked at.
That's right. This is actually a great example. This is a great example of how my brain works. And just in case anyone ever meets me in person and they're like, well, geez, what's his deal? No, it's not you. It's me. I went to get our coffee the other day. That was a couple weeks ago now. And the woman behind the counter said, oh, you smell great. I said, oh, thank you. Because I've got my fancy cologne. Mm-hmm. And she's like, yeah, that's amazing. And I said, oh, thank you. It's very, very kind of you. I got my coffee and I left. And my takeaway from that was, I'm wearing too much cologne. I should cut back on the cologne. That was my takeaway.
Whereas I'd be thinking, just think how much better you'd smell with a good cleanse tone and moisturizer to complement that aroma.
All right. So I bought some toner.
Good lad.
Yeah. So I bought some, that's right. The skincare with Brennan Paul. We're back from the hack.
Cotton pads to apply.
Yep.
Good man.
But I will say, I notice I'm much more conscious now when my skin is oily. Like I'm more aware of it.
Yeah. And especially when you live in a cold climate, it will protect your skin massively. You'll know when you've reached that point because you'll suddenly go, God, my skin's so thirsty.
I don't know if I necessarily want to end up there, but
that's when you know you've reached peak moisturizing technique.
Yeah, I still haven't got to the moisturizer yet. I'm working up. I got to do these things. I can't do it all at once or it just won't happen. The Old Man from Dani. I've always been a vivid dreamer and have quite an active imagination. Although I dream a lot, I can rarely remember my dreams beyond the first 30 minutes I'm awake. As a kid, I would be frequented by nightmares and still from time to time get jolted awake with night terrors that leave me shaken and soaked in sweat. I tried to learn to lucid dream, but every time I attempt to do so, my subconscious reasserts itself and usually makes things tenfold worse than they were before, almost like it's punishing me for trying to take over. About the only tool I really have when trying to influence my dreams is that I can usually wake myself before things get too bad. Simply said, when I dream, I just have to sit back and watch the show. All this observation has made me a pretty good judge of when a dream is just random brain dumping and when something else is seeming to take place. I will often have dreams of things that will happen in my future. Regrettably, they've mostly just been mundane snippets of conversations or random little sequence of events that will result in a feeling of déjà vu when they finally take place. I always know when one of these dreams is happening, though. The dreams are just different. It's almost like a different camera or lens filter has been applied to the dreams as I watch them. Things are a little bit darker and in much sharper focus. There's always a feeling of almost having to strain to watch, like when you've been in a staring contest that's gone too long, and the sound is always a little muffled. It's not muted to the point of being unable to hear what is being said, but I have to listen carefully. These are the déjà vu dreams. The ones that let me know I'm walking the right path when the little nudges take place in my waking life. The other dreams, though, the ones on the other side, have this filter applied to them, but it's not taking place in our world. I'm aware that what I'm seeing breaks the rules of the world we live in, but the discordance doesn't force me to wake up. I can't seem to choose to act, but I am aware of the thoughts of the me that I'm watching. It's always viewed dually, where I am aware of my surroundings as though in an out-of-body state, but I can also see everything through my eyes at the same time. Even just writing that, it's hard to wrap my mind around. This is definitely not a situation of past life regression. These parallel versions of me have similar life experiences and knowledge, are still dating or married to my wife, and even have my dog. There's just one major difference between these other me's that I visit and myself. They have all been men, and I am not. This might be a bit confusing, but I'm trans and have been my authentic self for 5 years now. Fuck yeah. I remember what it was like to be a man, though, and I remember how I used to look and how it used to feel. The first dream happened probably in 2019. It all started as a dream where my girlfriend Jenny and I had just purchased a new house and were moving stuff in. The dream literally starts as I set a dusty box down in the living room of a house I've never seen. I look outside to see the hot summer sun is setting. I check the time on my watch and then look in a mirror. I'm wearing the sort of clothes I always do and always have. Cargo shorts, tennis shoes, and a nerdy graphic t-shirt, and my buzz-cut hair is growing out a little long. I run my hand through it and wipe sweat off my forehead, feeling the inch-long hair that is still sharp and pokey from the last time it was shaved with clippers. Jenny comes into the living room from the bedroom with our border collie Leah in tow behind her and mentions she's hungry. I agree, and we decide we've made some good progress so far, so we deserve a nice break for dinner and can then keep unpacking after. We're starting to discuss where we should go or if we should order something in when a van pulls into our driveway and Leah starts aggressively barking. I watch through the front window as a nurse helps an elderly man in a wheelchair exit the van and they approach the front door. They knock and Jenny holds on to Leah to settle her while I answer the door. The nurse looks confused when I answer, and the old man appears to be nearly catatonic in his chair. She was looking for the prior owner of the house and explained that she used to have service dogs who would have visits from elderly people to help comfort them regularly. The gentleman she was with was feeling unwell and hoping for an unscheduled visit. This is Idaho. We're generally a polite kind of people, so I invite them in as we discuss the mix-up. At this time, I get a really good look at the old man. He is in rough condition. He's old and withered with skin that seems to be nearly translucent white, stretched over parchment paper that has yellowed with time, like the color of the edges of old paperback library books. His skin is almost flaky in places, like the corners of his mouth and near the joints, but still somehow has a waxy look to it. He has very long, bony fingers and sharp fingernails, and his eyes are sunken back into his head and glazed over. He's in a bathrobe despite the heat, and his patchy hair is white and whisper-thin where it remains. He doesn't have eyebrows. His mouth is hanging slightly open, and he has an oxygen line running from the back of his chair to his nose. I feel bad for him, even if I find him somewhat off-putting. It seems like he doesn't have much time left, and if I can bring the old man some peace, I'm happy to try. Leia is a very empathetic dog and tuned into people's emotions, so while not having any formal training as a service animal, she does help Jenny and I when things like anxiety attacks and severe depression episodes occur. She also absolutely loves people, so I go get her from Jenny, who doesn't look pleased with the situation, but has clipped a leash into her collar. I start leading Leia over, but she's refusing to get within arm's reach of the old man, even to the point of growling and baring her teeth. I let go of the leash and she rushes back to Jenny. I apologize to them both and explain that she's never like this with people. The nurse is kind of flustered about the whole situation and trying to smooth things over while also backing the old man out towards the door. At this point, I actually start listening to my intuition, and I feel something is horribly wrong. The old man's eyes are suddenly sharp and focused, and I see he has no colored iris to his eye. It's just bloodshot sclera and black pupil. I also cannot hear any air coming out of the oxygen system. No occasional breathing hiss or continuous flow, nor has he been making the chest and shoulder motions that should come with breathing. As I get to the threshold of the door, he finally stops staring at Leia and looks directly into my eyes and says, "You have a beautiful dog." He then cracks a sinister smile and his teeth are all pointed and look razor sharp. The nurse returns him to the van and then they leave. I close the door and lock it, and then shiver from the cold that settled in the room in his wake. I then turn back to Jenny, and we start talking about how weird all of that was. That's where the first dream ends, right at the start of their conversation after that thing left. I was left with a feeling that something really bad had noticed them, and that it somehow had come to feed. I have no idea what they encountered, or if anything else has happened to them since. I hope they're doing all right. So, Dani, holy shit. That is scary as hell.
This is quite odd because I was doing an interview yesterday where it's based on a very controversial UFO abduction case in Scotland. Okay. And one of the witnesses is a child who claimed that after the event they were visited by a white entity with sharp, pointy teeth.
Oh, shit. Well, I don't believe that's a coincidence.
No, exactly.
So now I know this is an episode of the show, so we don't want to spoil it, but can you let us in a little bit on what that experience was like with the child, or what the child's experience was like?
Yeah, he had it happen twice. Once he was playing in his bedroom with his friend, and his friend went, "What's that?" and pointed out the window, and there was this white entity floating outside the bedroom window. Wasn't standing on a windowsill or anything, and they were on the upstairs, and it was just floating outside, and it was smiling with all these sharp teeth showing.
Jesus.
And then the second time, he was in the bath and started screaming, and his mum ran in to get him, and apparently it had been stood in the sink, watching him in the bath.
Oh, inside the house.
Yeah.
Fascinating. You know, Dani said at the beginning of this that they can tell the difference between a deja vu dream and a regular dream and you know, something else. And this does feel like something else.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and I think the idea of something coming to feed might not be far off. Because, I mean, what you're describing almost sounds like something that enjoys scaring a kid.
Yep.
And I mean, it could just be that whatever this entity is he's just a real dick.
Yeah.
But I kind of think there might be more to it than that.
Mm. Yeah. Well, fear itself could be food for something.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely think that's a thing. I really do. I think, especially, you know, I mean, I was never able to make an episode out of this, but, you know, I do think there is something, not all the stories, a lot of them are bullshit, but, you know, this notion of like astral spiders, you know, because you and I have talked about my many, many nightmares revolving around like, I mean, spiders, but spiders in a very specific way. You know, I mean, I've had just, you know, spider nightmares because, hey, spiders are gross. But there are others which seem much more similar to Dani's ability to discern between the two.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's a nightmare and then there's this something else.
Mm.
And I think these things, I think fear is part of it.
Mm.
You know, like strong emotion somehow serves them in a way. As you say, it could be food, could be something, but it's chilling that this thing approached them in a way where it tried to evoke pity.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Catch them unawares.
That's it, to let your guard down.
Mm. But the dog saved them. Never trust a person a dog doesn't like.
Well, see, I will say, sometimes dogs will bark at me and I think, oh God, what have I done?
They know.
This Yorkshire Terrier sees into my soul. Yeah, exactly. It's not just a little maniac barking at everyone it sees. No. It has weighed me into balance and found me wanting. There's two things I got in my notes here. One is more serious and one is silly. I'll mention the silly one first. So I used to have more deja vu dreams, and I haven't had them in a long time, or in a while at least, but there was one I remember when I was working at Bocce's back in the day. We had the desk in the back, which was kind of on a raised platform. It was that way when we took the building over. And so that's where at the end of the night, you know, I'd go take the cash back there, I'd count out the float, and then I would also do the books for the end of the night. And we had this very, very specific mug. And the deja vu always seems centered around this mug. And of course it was, because now I have to admit this, but the handle was a penis. Mm. And this was just on, and I don't think you could probably, or nor should you, get away with this anymore in a place of business. But this was just on the staff desk, this dick mug. And I always remember I would sit down and do the books and I'd have this incredible sense of deja vu. And it was every time I looked at that goddamn dick mug. And I don't know what this says about me or the mug or really anything about in the universe, but I think it's somehow fitting that, you know, my most common deja vu flashpoint was a fucking dong, a ceramic dong.
Freud would have a field day with that.
Well, how long have you been feeling this way? What does your mother say about this? Well, actually, I think my mother bought the mug. Oh, interesting.
Let me contact my friend Nando.
I'm funny enough, I'm reading a book right now, The Devil's Chessboard, which is about the life of former CIA director Allen Dulles. And at one point, his wife and his mistress both saw Carl Jung, which I thought was kind of funny. There's a synchronicity for you.
Yeah, clearly he was an issue.
Oh yeah, he's a real bastard. Very interesting book, but not something we'll talk about on this show. The other thing that before we move on is I wanted to mention this because it occurred to me while reading the story, and you know, that is like a brilliantly detailed dream. You know, that is a level of dream detail that I think most people just can't do. You know, I very rarely dream that detailed. But one of the reasons I wanted to read the whole thing, because I could have trimmed it up, but is I wanted to, and it's not just the reason I didn't trim it up, this is partially the reason why we're doing a 2-volume dream show, is I really wanted to remind everyone that as cool and as fascinating as the paranormal is, there are worlds inside yourself that you can explore. I know I do this all the time, right? If you ever think to yourself, like, man, I am so fucking boring, you know, and you think, oh, I don't have these, you know, adventures or whatever, I don't do X or Y, sit with it. Because I think if you really can look inside yourself, I'm willing to bet you're more interesting than you think you are. And I just think, you know, just we're sitting with folks, you know, if you ever have that moment where you think, you know, I'm not very interesting. Again, maybe people don't think this. I mean, I think this about myself all the time, but, you know, just if you're there, I want you to just think about that and just think, you know what? I bet there's a hell of a lot more going on inside you than you realize. You just got to spend a little time with it. And this just seemed like a really good, I don't know, seemed like a good time to remind everyone of that.
The Garden from Micah. I wanted to share with you a particular dream that I truly believe was my dad's way of reaching out to me when I needed him the most. I figured if anyone would treat it with respect, it would be you guys. My dad and I were very close until my teenage years. Nothing dramatic unfolded, but I moved out and began to live my own life. Our relationship just became distant. In my 20s, we had a falling out over my brother. My brother and I were always at odds, and when my dad took his side after a pretty terrible fight, I cut them both out of my life for my own good. I won't sugarcoat it. My brother was nasty and mentally abusive towards me my whole life, even physically on a few occasions. My dad felt obligated to stick with him as a parent should, but he made too many excuses for him, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I was stubborn and so angry at them both. But after a few years, I missed them terribly. I wanted to reconnect, and over the next 3 years our relationships mended. Sadly, my dad died in October of 2020. He passed quietly away in his sleep at the far too young age of 54. Being on the other side of the country, and with travel still restricted due to COVID, I wasn't able to say goodbye. He was promptly cremated, so there wasn't even a funeral or a wake to attend. He was just gone. Now I'm no stranger to death, as it's followed me since before I was born. Having lost a sister I never got to meet, a brother I barely remember, and my mum by the time I was 7. So as I see it, while he wasn't a phone call away anymore, he was out there somewhere. Loved ones are never truly gone, my dad would always say. Within a few months, I had a couple of short dreams wherein he and I were together, talking. Each time I was aware in my dream that he had passed away, but I only thought it, I never said it aloud. I was afraid he would leave or disappear if I said the words. This brings me to the big dream, The dream that felt so real, I called my close friend about it a day or two after, reflecting. He's not a believer in the afterlife, or much of anything otherworldly at all, but even he believed that this was no ordinary dream. A year after his death, I moved to the city where he passed, where I still reside now. My brother lives here too, and I wanted to reconnect, being that we were all that were left of the family. Unfortunately, we had another falling out within a week of me moving here. I was so distraught at what I felt were losing my family all over again. I was depressed and alone, having moved away from my best friends and every piece of comfort I knew. This is when I really began to process my dad's death. I was heartbroken and missed him more than ever. I talked aloud to him, and even wrote him messages on his unused Instagram, too afraid to text him in case someone had his old number. I worked so hard on keeping my mind and emotions healthy, as I live with suicidal ideation. I asked him for strength and guidance. Slowly, I came to a peace surrounding my delusioned relationship with my brother, and the fact that I would have to wait to see my family again someday. And that's when he showed up at my door. In my dream, of course. It began with a gentle knock at my apartment door. I opened it with no expectations of who might be on the other side. And there he was, my dad, standing in my doorway with a suitcase. I stood there confused, and in my head I knew he wasn't alive. He told me he needed to stay with me for a bit, and I just sort of stared at him wide-eyed and mouth agape as he smiled and just let himself in, walking past me and into my kitchen. He took a seat and I made us some tea. Sitting across from him, the alarms in my head kept ringing, annoyingly reminding me that he was gone. Still afraid of saying it to him, I gingerly asked how long he was intending to stay. He told me probably a couple of weeks, but really as long as I would put up with him. A typical response my dad would give. I didn't know what to say. After a bit of time and general chit-chat had passed, I asked him if he wanted to go have dinner in the garden. Now I don't have a majestic garden like the one in my dream, but it was beautiful. Peaceful, private and serene. The sun had already begun to set as we began talking, and that's when I got the courage to say what I'd been so afraid to tell him. I said to my dad, "I'm not sure you're supposed to be here, Dad. You're not alive." To which he smiled a melancholy smile and softly replied, "I know." I began crying and asked him why he was here, how he was here. So many thoughts and emotions running through my mind. I even have my internal thoughts of being aware that this was a dream. I don't quite know how to describe it, but I was painfully aware that this wasn't actually happening, that I was only dreaming. But I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to leave. Sitting across from my dad, he said to me, "I'll stay as long as you let me." And while I asked him to stay, I said something to the effect of, "But you and I know you can't stay forever." There was this unspoken understanding and acceptance between us that while he would always be around, he couldn't stay with me anymore. There were tears. My dad and I share the sensitive trait in our family, and an all too real sense of things coming to an end. I held on to moments like that for as long as I could. When the dream reached its tipping point, it was like the sadness fell away from us, and like a camera panning away from the scene, I was being pulled away watching the two of us talking and reminiscing at the table. I woke up and immediately broke into tears, but I smiled all the same. I thanked my dad, told him I loved him, and honestly just fell back asleep. Now some may say that it was my emotional state that brought this dream on. I won't argue with that. It could very well have been my brain creating an ending I didn't get in life. But what makes me think otherwise is that in my dream I was more than aware that it wasn't reality. I was somewhere else entirely. It was my apartment, but just enough was different to be obvious to me. Even acknowledging to myself that my father was dead seems like the kind of thing that would wake one from a dream. But there I was, sharing a heartfelt goodbye with the man I had lost at a time when we were just beginning to bond again. Since that dream, I've only had one other. This time it was both of my parents. They basically communicated that they were just checking in. We were all sat in the sunshine, facing forward so I couldn't see their faces, but I heard them nonetheless. I just smiled and kept looking forward. It's been at least 6 months since anyone's made a cameo in my dream, and I think I'm okay with that. I know they're around if I need them. Well, that's the end of my story. Thank you for reading. It's been on my mind for a while, and it feels good to share a story of hope and love that carries on. Thank you for all that you guys do and the sensitivity for which you broach these topics. I truly wish nothing but the best for you guys and the whole team who put this show together. Take care. I always find stories like this quite difficult, primarily because I never knew my father, ever.
Right.
My biological father tried to kill me and my mother when she was pregnant.
Jesus Christ.
And so I've never, ever met the man that brought me into the world. So I often have a real difficulty sometimes when I see friends or people talk about relationships like this, because I've never had any concept of anything like that ever in my life. So I find stories like this both moving and unsettling because they are emotions I do not comprehend.
I understand. I mean, my experience with my father wasn't that bad, but, you know, as I mentioned on the last show, you know, I found out he died in August because my sister did a Google search and his obituary came up. And all my memories of him are a furious man, just filled with rage. That's what I knew, you know? So I understand to a degree. I understand. Certainly never that bad, but I'm happy when I read accounts like Micah's because I think, well, I'm glad someone is having that experience.
Definitely. It's lovely.
Know? And Micah, and this is a different Micah than the first story, just to be clear. Thank you for sharing that, because that's just, as you say, it's a beautiful story of hope. And, you know, I think the fact that her brain kept trying to alert her to the unnatural nature of it, I think that's very indicative that there is more going on here than just wish fulfillment. Absolutely.
And if it was, with the greatest respect, a self-created illusion for comfort, then you wouldn't just have it once, would you? You'd have it over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And this is just, I don't know. It's perfect. As I mentioned at the top of the show, there were two stories that kind of made me almost tear up in the coffee shop, and this was the other one.
I always say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family, and therefore you shouldn't have to put up with it.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, shit, yeah. No, I mean, the notion that family is somehow, you know, it's like the last thing, the last line of defense between you and the cold, hard world. That's such horseshit.
Bollocks.
That's such horseshit.
It's damaging.
It is damaging because how many people, you know, especially right now, the climate is just, things have gotten so polarized. And so you've got these kids coming out to their families and their families just, oh, you know, that's not how we do things here. Like that fucking matters.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've been abandoned by the people who are supposed to be the people who will love you no matter what. No, that's horseshit. No, if you have shitty family, folks, consider us your adopted internet uncles. You can have a lot of them if you want. We are your adopted internet uncles because that's bullshit. And, but I will say, like, that means nurture your friendships.
Yep.
Nurture your friendships. And I know we've got this fucked up thing we do. There's a lot of fucked up stuff we do, Paul, but there's this fucked up thing we do as people where we seem to prioritize romantic entanglement above friendship. And I think that's really dangerous because romantic entanglements can come and go.
Yep.
But your friends are the ones who, you know, if they're good friends, they're the ones who are there for you when that other shit falls apart.
Especially when they're really good friends from the opposite sex as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Jesus Christ, don't sacrifice your same sex or your opposite sex friendships for a partner. Never do that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
If that makes people uncomfortable, then they've got the problem, not you.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, they're not funny. I don't know. They're kind of funny. I've been, you know, as I said, I've been sick. So I've been in bed a lot and, you know, not the fun way either. And just miserable.
There's lots of fun you can have in bed. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, I didn't bring my battleship. I left it in the toilet. Anyways, let's move on before I make this worse.
Yes.
But Yeah, so, laying in bed and I somehow end up, because I'm always maintaining the fucking Ghost Story Guys Instagram account, and once I get into Instagram, I just have a hell of a time pulling myself away. I found myself reading a lot of these Am I the Asshole threads on Reddit. Like these Reddit accounts that post these screen caps. And folks, if you're not familiar with this, I mean, good for you. But basically it's where people will post shit that's going on in their lives, where they'll talk about how they reacted, and then they'll ask, was I the asshole for reacting this way? And I got to tell you, man, I don't understand why most people are in relationships. It just sounds like, well, I finally found someone who I can make as miserable as I am. And I think, Jesus, Horatio Christ, there's got to be a better way. No wonder people are fucking less. You can't stand being in the same room as each other. Good Lord. You got to like each other first, folks. That helps.
Yes.
Oh, man. So, Micah, we've kind of gone far off the plot here, but thank you so much for sharing that with us again. That was very beautiful. I'm actually very jealous of your dream garden as well. That sounded lovely.
One last romantic tip. Find someone who looks at you the way I look at Bigfoot.
That's a tall order, folks. That's a tall order. Follow from Elizabeth. This will be our last story for tonight. When I listen to your show, I am reminded of the kitchen discussions from my childhood where adults sat and talked of the paranormal as though it were completely normal daily occurrences. Where, even as a child, I was welcome to tell my experiences. Sometimes I feel storytelling is a dying art, and you guys make me feel like I'm home again, a place I haven't been in a long, long time. My family has always been sensitive. My grandmother carried all the Scottish stories and folklore from her grandmother, including leaving butter for the good people at the holly tree. Once my grandfather trimmed that holly tree without talking to her first. She gave him what for and stomped outside with butter and milk and cheese, telling the good ones all his faults as she placed the treats around the base of the tree. I saw colors around people as a child. I would tell folks, "You're blue, he is orange." It was just what I saw. My gran said I saw auras, and I didn't know what that meant, but she didn't seem to think it was a big deal, so neither did I. Eventually, people said things and scared me, and I stopped seeing them. I am still an excellent judge of character and know things about people. There are many stories I could tell of my own experiences and those of my family, but this one is about a particular dream I had that has marked me forever. I have a friend I have known for many, many years. He and I instantly connected, as though we had known one another all our lives. We grew up in the same neighborhood, in the same city, knew the same people. His dad was and is a bluegrass musician, and so was my grandfather. They played on a lot of the same stages. But he and I never met. Our lives basically ran parallel and didn't intersect until 2004. At 17, he moved to Denmark to chase a girl and didn't come back until he was in his late 20s. This is when we met. There's more to this story, but I should really just get to the point. My friend moved back to Denmark in 2007 and settled down with a young woman in the same year I married my husband. We kept in touch, weekly Skype calls, letters, Facebook Messenger. He seemed to be doing well. My husband was in the military. In the summer of 2010, he was sent to England. By December, he still had 6 months left in his deployment. I'd been alone with our kids, 2 his, 1 mine, for 6 months and was going insane. So for Christmas, he bought me a ticket and made arrangements for me to spend 6 weeks with him. As the time to leave for England approached, I started having anxiety dreams. So my therapist insisted I journal these dreams. I would wake up and write them in a notebook beside the bed. One night, I sat bolt upright in bed, covered with sweat, barely able to breathe. I had dreamed I was on a bus with my friend and a woman. This woman was not the woman I knew as his current partner. He had a type, and she fit the bill, but she wasn't the woman I knew. On the bus, I sat in the side-facing seat. They sat in the front-facing seat nearest me. We were chatting and laughing. Then the bus stopped. The girlfriend stood, picked up her bags and knapsack, and started off the bus. My friend and I stood as well, but she turned and looked at us and put her hand up. This is where the dream freezes for a moment. I remember clearly all I could think about was how her scarf matched her eyes. They were so very blue. She looked at him and said, "This is my stop, not yours. You can't come." I don't know if he responded, but she turned to me at this point and said, "Don't let him follow me." She looked directly into my eyes and said this. I'm getting goosebumps writing this. It was so real. She got off the bus and he lay down on the bus bench next to me with his head in my lap and sobbed. My heart was broken for him. I saw her face out the window as we pulled away. It went from a beautiful Scandinavian young woman's face to a haggard, drawn, toothless face. Then a skull. Like she morphed from Lagerta into the Crypt Keeper right before my eyes. Then someone opened the Ark of the Covenant. I screamed and everything turned upside down as the bus crashed. That's when I woke. The dream shook me and stuck with me for weeks, but I couldn't get a hold of my friend to tell him about it. Once I got to England, he finally touched base through Facebook. He was sorry we would not be able to visit. He had been in treatment and had met a new woman. Red flags all over the place even if I hadn't had the dream. They were living together on an island, and he was no longer in Copenhagen. He sent me a picture of them. It was her. It was her all day long. I asked him to call me, but he didn't. We lost contact for the most part with the occasional messages and holiday greeting. His dad kept me in the loop. She didn't want my friend talking to me. She personally made it explicitly clear to me, although I will not go into detail here. By 2018, I had dreamed this dream at least once a month, sometimes multiple times a week for weeks. Each time the crash at the end became more intense. I eventually learned to tell myself I was dreaming and pull myself up out of the dream before it could really get started. It disturbed me horribly, and each time would bring out an attempt to get in contact with him. The dream gave me such a sense of dread. In March of 2018, my friend and his partner moved here to live with his dad. She was only allowed to remain in the US for a few months on her passport. She returned to Denmark. He went on a vacation with his mother, who he had not seen in years. During his vacation with his mom, he and I started communicating. He suffers from the same anxiety disorder I do, and he needed to talk to someone who could understand. We know the fear is irrational, but that doesn't make it go away. He told me he was afraid for his relationship. He was coming unglued with anxiety. One night he went into a full-blown panic attack because she wasn't responding to his calls. I talked to him until he got a hold of her and calmed down. Eventually she responded and they were fine again. 2 nights later, I had the dream again. This time I could smell the bus. I could smell his cologne. I could feel the leather of the seat. I tried to wake myself up, but no dice. So I watched it play out again. I woke up sick, physically ill. When I picked up my phone, I had multiple voicemails and messages. The first text I saw was from my friend. She is dead. She had died of a heroin overdose the night before. All I could hear was her voice in my head saying, "Don't let him follow me." All I could see was her face melting as we drove away. He was suicidal. He refused company. He would not leave his room and was self-medicating. His family was at the end of the rope. I barged in and refused to leave. I was not going to let him follow her. I stayed beside him through the worst, and boy, did the aftermath feel like a bus crash. There were days I felt like I was run over by the bus, and days I wanted to run over him with the bus, but he made it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, and there were a lot of days in rehab and lots of hours of therapy. He is now living in the Pacific Northwest. He has a job he loves and a partner who cares deeply for him. My job is done. He's safe. What he went through was horrific. True possession has more to do with the interior of the human mind and heart than the paranormal, and true demons are sold on street corners. To watch the self-destruction of a person unfold in front of you, helpless to stop it, is unimaginable. His guilt engulfed him, and he became possessed as well. I hope her soul is at peace, and I know wherever she is, she doesn't blame him. She never did. She didn't want him to follow her, and he didn't. Man, I don't even know where to start, Paul, but I'm going to say, Elizabeth, thank you for being that person. Mm-hmm. Because holy shit, that's a hard road. That's a hard thing to do. It's hard to be, you have to be firm, and you got to force yourself into a situation sometimes, and that's not easy. So yeah, shit. Thank you for being one of those people. Any thoughts there, Paul?
It's something very close to home. I've lost a lot of friends that I grew up with to heroin over the years. More than most people. When I tell people how many funerals I've been to, They sometimes think I'm making it up.
Yeah.
And you get to a point sometimes where you think, do I really need to go to this one as well? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen the very worst ravages of it and what it does to people and how it changes them and what they lose and everything. And people who are so consumed by it that they, even when they're clean, they always fear that they can't go away. I've lost several friends who had given it up, but were concerned that they were going to get back into it, so they took their own lives.
Oh my God. So
it's a subject that's dear to me, but not in a positive. Like I say, I've seen it at its very worst, full frontal, immersed in it. I've seen it destroy people I loved. So yeah, for having the tenacity and the strength of character and the love of somebody to put your foot down and dive in there without fear is something that should be applauded, and more people need to do sometimes, because it's easier to give up than it is to fight for people you love.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone who wrote in. This episode turned out to be a lot heavier than I expected, but still very, very good. And we're so goddamn grateful for all of you, who listen. Like we just had our best month ever for Ghost Story Guys, like our like ever. And it's such a fucking honor to know that you care enough to listen and share these things with us and trust us with your stories. And I think I speak for both of us when we say that it's an incredible gift, and we appreciate it deeply.
I think it's deeply humbling to know that people believe that we have the respect for them to treat their experiences across a wide variety of fields in a balanced and honest manner without pulling them apart, and just let them tell their stories. So thank you to everybody that feels safe enough to share them with us, because we really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our Ghost Wars shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope, and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now, and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you, and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. Thanks as always to Luke, Sarah, Anthony, Joseph, and everyone else who's part of the Ghost Story Guys family. Don't forget to check out Luke's podcast, Luke Lore, available everywhere fine podcasts live. And of course, Joseph's YouTube channel, The Cardinal Rule. That is about Arizona Cardinals football. And of course, Joseph and I also host a live stream, Weird Together, which is actually going to be an audio show as well. So that's something we're working on that. We'll talk about that more as it comes around. But so you can find links to all of those in the show notes. And of course, a very special thanks, as always, to you, my friend and co-host, the paranormal Johnny Carson, Paul Bestel, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what is coming up on M&M?
It's raining cryptids in December.
It really is.
Yes. So we've got Texas Bigfoot with the wonderful Lyle Blackburn.
Nice.
I indulged my inner fanboy with somebody I've wanted to speak to since before the show began. A marvellous gentleman called Pat Spain, who is the great nephew of Charles Fort.
No kidding.
Yeah. And the host of two brilliant series, Beast Hunter and Legend Hunter, and a cancer survivor. So we have a really good chat about his life and his career and his battles, both monstrous and in reality. And then Ken Gerhardt will be joining me towards the end of the month as we dive into the Beast of Gévaudan.
Fantastic. I cannot wait. And where can everyone find you online?
Mysteries Monsters is all on all podcast platforms and also across all social media networks, even ones I can't use very well.
Fair. And I'm Largely the Truth on Twitter, Instagram, and both Hive and Mastodon, neither of which I use. And you can find the archived episodes of my interview podcast, Largely the Truth, with Brennan Storr, everywhere you get your podcasts. Again, Weird Together is a live stream every month. We talk about the latest and greatest in independent horror films. And that will be also an audio show at some point in the new year. That's all being hammered out. And like we said at the top of the show, if you want to become a patron, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. We already told you get an ad-free feed, and who doesn't want that? Ads suck. But you also get access to all our bonus shows like Book of the Dead, Host Adventures, me and Paul, Sunken Library, all this cool extra shit that we do. And yeah, and you just get to be part of a great community. We have some fantastic fucking people in that Patreon. They're all fantastic people. And so if you want to come hang out with all those fantastic people, you can do that at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. And of course, if you're a member at $20 and above, you are part of an elite club. You are part, of course, of Ghost Force. That's right. Members of Ghost Force get thanked every second episode. Well, I mean, previously, there have been some delays, but I swear it's for a good reason. But now, members of Ghost Force are thanked every second episode here in this segment, because by God, you're nuts and we love you for it.
Love you.
Yeah, that's right. We're not shy about our emotions, as you may have noticed from this episode. So. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are
Ethan Saragon,
Amy Chamberlain,
Carrie Lambertus,
Cheryl Baker,
Generic Bob,
Hannah Brown,
Hunter Siemens,
Hilary DeSaussure,
Gene Morris,
Jason R. Slaughter,
Jennifer Muller,
Jennifer Sharko,
Joseph Como,
Julia Ava Bacon,
Kimberly Hansen,
Maddie Letherman,
Mara Noriega,
Mark Semler,
Peter Guns 08.5,
Rebecca Brink,
Rondell Sheen,
Richard Easby,
Robin Tien.
You are the proud, you are the spooky, you are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. Yeah, exactly.
Out of practice.
It's been a while.
Yeah, well, I am 50.
Fair, yeah, and I'm just out of shape.
Yeah, I don't look a day over 49.
I would say even 48.
That's moisturizer for you, baby.
All that toner. Folks, thank you so much. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. Yeah, that you want to support us at that level is deeply humbling. We appreciate it very, very much. So thank you to all the members of Ghost Force. Thank you indeed to all our patrons, past, present, and future. And of course, if you want to join the team, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. All right. So, Paul, guest spots. You were on Mission Spooky recently, which I just finished listening to a couple days ago. That was a brilliant show.
Yeah, that was great fun. Thank you very much for them to put up with me and ask me some questions, some of which I answered in one-word answers.
Indeed you did. I got to tell you, though, one of my favorite things was the fact that Kiki introduced you as the paranormal Johnny Carson. That made me so fucking happy. Yes.
I had a great time. It was really lovely to speak to them, and they were wonderful hosts and looked after me. And even though one of them had to go shopping because apparently they needed food or some other shit.
Sounds fake to me.
It was great fun. I had a real blast. So thank you very much for them for inviting me on.
Fabulous. And any other spots coming up?
Not at the moment, though. I may be being booked for another conference.
Another conference?
Mm.
All right. 2023 is the year of Bestel. I am here for this.
So yeah, you never know. Find out next week if they want me. So that should be interesting.
Very cool. Another UK conference?
Yeah. It's in the Northwest. So I'll feel a bit more comfortable there.
Yeah, that's fair.
I like that area. I'm a big Mancophile, as many people who know me know. So anyway, that area, I always like to travel around Lancashire and Greater Manchester in that particular place. So that should be good. Oh,
that's great, man. Fantastic. No new spots for me, although actually that's not entirely true. Way earlier this year, I recorded a spot on the podcast Mystere Creations. And that just dropped about a week and a half ago, I think. So this actually, I think it dropped before Strange Little Place even was announced for the second edition. So it's an older interview, but Alan from Mystere has become a friend. And so that is out there and you can check that out. I'll put a link to that in, you can always go to ghoststoryguys.com. You'll find a link to all of our appearances. I know Luke has recently appeared on the Horror Makes You Brave podcast. Again, you'll find that link at ghoststoryguys.com. He's talking about the, I want to say 1989 Stephen King adaptation, Pet Sematary. It might be earlier than 89. But anyways, you'll find a link to that, again, at ghoststoryguys.com. And indeed, you'll find a link to all of our guest appearances there.
Yes. Features one of the best instances of a small child attacking a large man with a scalpel.
It's a very narrow field, but you know.
I can't think of any others, actually.
Nope. That's a very, very narrow field. But you got it. So I guess it's also the worst.
Yes, it is. Fair. Still makes me wince.
Anything scalpel related freaks me out. They're so sharp. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's Luke. That's on Horror Makes You Brave. And again, all our guest appearances are linked at ghoststoryguys.com. Don't forget, if you want to pick up a signed copy of my latest book or the new edition of A Strange Little Place, you can do so at ghoststoryguys.bigcartel.com. And those are $20 US plus shipping, of course. And I can personalize it however you like. Just make sure to add a note in the when you do the checkout. And then I will fill it out however you please. And again, that's ghoststoryguys.bigcartel.com. If you want to pick up any Ghost Story Guys merch, you can do so. Right now, there's, for a very limited time, there you can buy a t-shirt with my face on it. That started out as a joke. That because my friend Moonrunner83, who you've heard played on the show before, he made a joke and he said, you should make a shirt with your face on it and I will buy it. So I called his bluff and I made a shirt with my face on it and he bought it. So I've left it up there for maybe another week or so, because a couple of people then asked, when they saw the shirt, they asked for the link. And I don't know if you God help you, you want to wear that. I can't imagine why, but it's out there. It's on our Redbubble store. It's ghoststoryguys.redbubble.com. I don't know. It's very strange. Even I won't wear that. It's a little too meta.
I thought I was weird telling the cats I was a podcaster.
Well, would you just wait till I put your face on a shirt? That actually might happen. Okay, yeah, let's file that away.
Don't do that. That's not fair to people.
Well, I know, because they're going to want to buy it. They'll need to buy it.
Yeah, that wouldn't frighten me at all.
Well, okay, that's happening. Anyways, moving on, we'll deal with that later. But yeah, if you want to pick up any other Ghost Story Guys merch, you can do so at by going to ghoststoryguys.com, follow the links to our TeePublic and Redbubble stores, and hopefully sometime in the new year, you'll be able to buy it all just at ghoststoryguys.com. But we're not quite there yet, but it's coming. And if you do buy something, of course, make sure to tag us on social media. We love seeing you guys wearing our gear. It makes our day. And thank you to everyone who buys our stuff. Shout out again to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Jerry Smith. You can reach Jerry at rainydaysforghosts@gmail.com. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Podzontommusic. Find more from him at nightharvestrecordings.com or by searching for Podzontommusic wherever you get your tunes. Our Stories theme is A Future Belongs to Them Now by Hexagram. Find more from them by searching for Hexagram wherever you get your music. Remember, that's Hexagram with 2 X's, not 3. And I guess that's going to do it.
Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks, but until then,
into the darkness we go. I can't remember if that's my note or if that's part of her story. I don't remember.
Yeah, that sounds like something you'd write.
Yeah. I think that was a note, and then I forgot to. Anyways.
Don't worry. It's very nice, having been born in the 70s, to be reliving them when I can experience it. I can't wait for the blackout.
I screwed up recently because I ordered these custom shirts, these dress shirts from this place, and I was trying out this service. And they hadn't come, and the tracking just stopped in Los Angeles. And finally, I said, look, they're not coming. What do we do? And so they said, well, we'll remake them. We'll resend them. Oh, thank you very much. But then when they sent me the confirmation, I realized I'd put the wrong fucking postal code down.
Oh, you silly sausage.
So I had to shamefacedly. Now, thankfully, I was not an asshole when I through this whole process. I was very just like, that's fine. We'll fix it. That's okay.
Where are my shirts?
Yeah, right. Because I had to go and say, excuse me, I'm an idiot. Please still send me my shirts. And I thought, you greasy bastards, this is why you're on here. Because international waters is the last place you can get away with saying that without being stabbed. Yes, sir.
Don't you? There's no need to be so polite. You're all right.
Your Grace.
After you, my liege.
Your worship, I say.
Polish my buttons, Viscount.
All right, now that's a little bit more suggestive than I care to get on the show. I say. Funny you mention that because Nick is rewatching A-Team just kind of after work, and she keeps sending me screenshots of the spectacularly racist costumes that Hannibal is always wearing.
I remember that one where he was disguised in, he was running a Chinese laundrette.
Yep.
And it's not that some of those haven't aged well.
No. That episode's a literal hate crime, I think. Jesus.
Shocking.
There's one where he looks like George Washington dressed up as the cook from The Shining. It's very upsetting. Very upsetting.
You bastard. I'm not sure where they originated from, but I always remember them as a child being with their incredibly un-PC advertising campaigns.
Wagon wheels?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Lot to do with the Old West.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yep.
Yes. Kind of advert you won't be able to show now.
Yes. Funny you mentioned, actually, I've been going to see these screenings put on by the Cine Club here in Montreal. And in front of, they showed Withnell and I.
Yeah.
Recently. And prior to that, the pre-show they had was a bunch of old Aardman stop motion commercials.
Yeah.
And there were some really, really uncomfortably horny commercials that those guys made. I mean, I remember sitting in that theater full of people watching some stuff that made me think, oh boy, I know what Pee Wee Herman felt like. Good Lord. You and I have had fucked up lives. You know that?